the newly elected president of Voices of Young Refugees in Europe, Maria, and Ewelina from Klub Studencki Pomorania, a youth organization of Kashubians in Poland. And we will be hearing from those two in just a little bit. Every year, Jan puts forward a work plan which connects all of our events under a theme. And for 2020, this theme has been Minority Youth in a Changing World, which is founded by the European Youth Foundation. Our last event of the year, Think United, could not be realized as a physical seminar, so instead we created this online series of webinars, which will be concluded with the webinar tonight. With the last event of 2020, Think United, we want to open up and provide the opportunity to look beyond national, ethnic, and linguistic minorities in order to understand the similarities and challenges that other minority groups are facing, and kind of create the space where you as participants can engage in dialogue and explore the complexity of discrimination. So shortly for the format of tonight, we will start with a 15-minute presentation from Maria from VYRE, followed by 10 minutes of questions and answers. Then we will proceed with a presentation from Ewelina from the Kashubian minority in Poland, followed by another 10-minute round of questions. And from a technical point, we will be recording this webinar, so we invite everyone to keep your cameras open, but if you don't want to be recorded, please leave it off. Also remember to keep your microphones off, especially during the presentations. If you have questions, feel free to write them at any time in the chat, and I will try to follow up on those during the Q&A part of the program. So with this, I would like to give the word to our first guest, Maria. The floor is yours.
Thank you for that introduction, Luna. I'm very happy to be here. I haven't engaged with Yen before, but I know that my organization VYRE has over the years. I've learned a lot throughout just preparing this presentation as well, so it was really a pleasure. And I'm glad this is like the first and hopefully not the last event of 2021 where we'll be able to work together. So let's see where this presentation is. So yeah, Voices of Young Refugees in Europe, VYRE. Who are we? VYRE was founded in 2008 by young refugees in the effort to unify and strengthen the voices of individual young refugees and refugee organizations in Europe. And even though we're physically registered in Strasbourg, we have more than 200 members across Europe. And just a brief introduction about myself here as well, that I'm personally from Aleppo, Syria as well, but I've been based in Armenia for the past 6 years now. So yeah, that's just a brief, just for you to understand that VYRE is truly all over the place. And we advocate on issues that prevent young refugees from active participation and representation in their local and European realities. And we also actively work to create opportunities for sharing personal testimonies and experiences in order to enhance the capacity of young refugees. Throughout these webinars, we've been talking a lot, and Yen has been talking a lot about structural discrimination. And what does this mean for young refugees? The first and foremost thing, especially from my experience as well, has been access to education. And especially when it comes to higher education, this is relevant all across Europe, if not globally. But also when we look, for example, specifically into Armenia, when I came here, I had 1 year of high school left, but it was just chaotic, and not only chaotic in terms of a different educational system, but also the fact that my education wasn't easily recognized, the one I had from Syria. the language barrier, which I'm going to talk about more in a minute or two, but also there's very obvious discrimination in the terms that a lot of high schools, they just decided to put all the refugees into separate classroom and call that a solution instead of changing the curriculum, instead of providing support or anything really. This was sort of a solution in the Armenian context, which was devastating and discriminatory as it gets. The second part is employability, because this is also directly linked to the recognition of skills, because a lot of refugees, especially young refugees, once again, their education is not fully recognized. Their skills, the jobs they took, their volunteering, their organizations that are more or less unheard of for the European context. So again, they're dismissed, and this heavily affects their employability. And this obviously in the end of the day affects them economically and mentally. And then we need to obviously address the language barriers, which is one of the biggest hurdles, especially when it comes to governments not organizing this or not allocating enough resources. This can put the lives of young refugees on pause for years. And once again, it's more than devastating. And finally, mobility is also a big issue that even VYRE has recognized and worked with over the years, because in a lot of cases, we have events and study sessions and trainings where we have motivated participants who come from a refugee background. And obviously these people, sometimes they don't have the paperwork, sometimes they don't have the visas, and this directly impacts them and discriminate against their opportunity to participate at our events and make their voices heard. So once again, mobility is still a very big obstacle here that discriminates against young refugees. And then finally, prejudice and misconceptions about who refugees are, who are young refugees, where do they come from, whether it be their educational background, their personal or life background, their religious affiliation. And this goes into different branches of racism, of Islamophobia, of prejudice. And again, this raises concerns about hostility and hate speech, which is a very recurring theme with far-right sentiments across Europe for the past few years, unfortunately. And again, this is also a question that we need to think about: how socially included are young refugees in their host communities? And this is more of enough of an evidence that there is a need for structures and organizations like VYRE, but obviously we need many structures like VYRE within our community, because in many countries, refugees and asylum seekers are not allowed to register organizations, networks, let alone sometimes bank accounts. And this disables them to do community work and to get their work recognized. And moving on, what does VYRE do? Knowing all of this obstacle, all of this discrimination that's ongoing, we focus on two main themes. One of them is advocacy, where we advocate for refugee rights. And the second one is to support young refugees through capacity building. So those are two main elements that VYRE has focused on throughout the years. And I'm going to give you more concrete examples now. So what are the tools, mechanisms, and good practices that VYRE has accumulated over the years? One of the brightest examples, especially from my experience as a participant first and then a member of VYRE, was study sessions, because that's how I found out about VYRE, let's say. Because several study sessions have been organized with different minority organizations. YEN is part of them. And we've been organizing this for quite a few years now on the situation and needs of young migrants and refugees. The second tool or a good practice is the consultative meetings, because VYRE has been one of the most important partners for the Council of Europe, with whom it held numerous consultative meetings on especially the topic of unaccompanied minors, their local participation and inclusion. And I'm gonna talk more about this and our achievements, because it is one of the proudest accomplishments that VYRE has achieved throughout the years. And then finally, the Advisory Council on Youth. So VYRE had 2 mandates. The last one ended at 2017, but hopefully a new one will be coming up very soon whenever the applications are open again, let's put it this way. So VYRE had 2 mandates at the Advisory Council on Youth. And for those of you who don't know, the Advisory Council is the non-governmental youth constituency of the Council of Europe. And it's a crucial part of the unique co-management structure where young people equally decide on the standards and work priorities of the Council of Europe's youth sector. So once again, representing young refugees here, focusing on the priorities, which affects a lot when it comes to the work of the youth department of the Council of Europe. Now, coming to the good practices, or what I would call proud accomplishments or achievements. The first one is the report on the transition of unaccompanied minors into adulthood. So this was in 2016 when VYRE published a report on the issue of transition of unaccompanied minors to adulthood, recommending that the issue should be brought back onto the political agenda and focus should be placed on new initiatives to improve the situation of this particular group, because as some of you might know, when young refugees who are unaccompanied, and they are, especially in the EU, whenever they turn 18, they're cut off almost of all the support they were getting so far. And this limits not only their rights, but this is simply traumatic to what they've already been experiencing, to simply cut off all the support out of someone because they reached the age of 18 is inhumane. But VYRE has worked a lot on this, and this wasn't just something that went on from 2016. It was ongoing for years, but obviously the report was the product of that. This report also highlighted some of the issues of young refugees undergoing transition, and some of the support that I mentioned includes education and the need for social inclusion through employment, and as well as addressing discrimination of refugees and the importance of inclusion and consultation with young refugees in the decision-making processes, because it's very, very common when it comes to young refugee projects, support programs, that the young refugees themselves are not consulted. Their needs are simply assumed, and there's no consultancy, or they're very rarely involved in decision-making processes. And that's where VYRE comes in as well, to make sure that their voices are truly heard. And this document again recognizes and emphasizes the need to consider young people in transition to adulthood as a specific group with very specific need, and their need for continued social protection and safeguards. And this was VYRE's part, more or less. And now here's the achievement, which was on the 24th of April, 2019, the Council of Europe Committee of Ministers adopted a recommendation advocating that member states should provide additional temporary support after the age of 18 to young refugees to enable them to access their rights. And everyone who knows VYRE knows how proud we were with this recommendation and the adoption of it by the Council of Europe Committee Ministers. But obviously this doesn't mean the fight is over. We still have a lot of fronts to advocate and make sure our voices are truly heard on. But this was truly an achievement that all of us are proud of till this very day. And now this was to actually answer a question by our moderator, like a pre-question sort of a thing. And it was about if there are any books or movies that provide a better understanding of the minority group that I'm representing today, who are young refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants. And what I would recommend here is Human Flow. This is a documentary captured over the course of 1 year in 23 countries, and these countries they start from Afghanistan to Iraq to Turkey to Germany to Greece. So it truly captures more or less the entire picture of what's happening over the course of 1 year. And the film follows a chain of urgent human stories that stretches across the globe, and it gives a powerful visual expression to human migration. It also illustrates both the staggering scale of the refugee crisis and its profoundly personal human impact, because in a lot of cases, there's always a lack of a human face to these stories. When it comes to migration, not only the reports, but especially in the media, there is an obsession with numbers, but there is a lack of human stories. So Human Flow is truly there to give a full and a very emotional expression of all of that. And now, to wrap it up more or less, I also had a question about just an unrelated piece of art or music or a book that I've been relating to. And here comes my latest song that I've been listening to nonstop. It's called Radio Romance by Meshra Leila, and it's a queer Lebanese group. All of their music is truly beautiful, but this one has been nonstop on repeat for the past month, I guess. And I'll share the link to this song as well as the link to the trailer of Human Flow after this presentation in a minute or so. And yeah, I hope you like it as well. So I'll stop sharing this now. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I will definitely listen to that song afterwards.
Oh, yeah, I'll share it right away before I forget or anything. Oh, that was very quick.
Already has it on. Nice. Yes, so I would like to open up for questions. If you have any, you're also very welcome to just ask them. I think since we're not that many people, I think we can chat like this as well. You can also post the questions in the chat. Okay, we have a question from Olga. Dear Maria, thank you for your presentation. Would you say that many refugees try to hide their culture and may even be ashamed of it because of the prejudices from society? And if so, does this influence the environment of more young people into your organization so that their voices can be heard and they can stand up for their rights?
Absolutely. This is a very accurate and a very existing, I wouldn't call it a problem because a lot of people see it differently, but for me it is an existing phenomenon, and many of my friends, like Syrian refugees here in Armenia as well, would just hide the Syrian part, would actively hide and fight it even, which I honestly don't want to make assumptions, but you can see the effect sometimes, and it is a negative effect. And while we haven't really been doing active things against this, but what VYRE has been actually doing is that it opens up its applications and everything for anyone. It doesn't specifically say that you have to identify as a refugee or you have to come from this country or whatever. So it sort of gives a chance for people who are still actively fighting this to perhaps give it more or less of a chance to be involved with such an organization. But in the end of the day, you truly can't force anyone, even if it's someone of your community, to be involved. But what VYRE does is open the doors for them and make it clear that they're more than welcome. And yeah.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Olga, for that question.
How can other youth groups or organizations support the work of VYRE?
Well, collaboration is key. While I mean, obviously there are a lot of project opportunities and also a lot of solidarity opportunities. Just always, really, if you think about it. So the best way to reach out, if you have any ideas, if you have any not only projects but honestly anything solidarity related, because like I can assure you that VYRE would be there to collaborate and to support any organization's work as well, because we only have each other in the end of the day as minorities, so what we have to be there. But yeah, for the coming year, I mean, we're still at the beginning of the year, so I can't really say concrete things, but I'm open to discussion. I can leave my email here as well in case anyone wants to discuss or collaborate on anything, and I'll be more than happy to start working.
Jan will definitely.
So I have a question, and maybe I will just do it like this. Thank you, Maria. I'm very happy that you're here with us today, and hope that Jen and VYRE can restart or continue the collaborations we had. So I was wondering, how was the last year for you as an organization with all the restrictions, and how did it impact your work, and what do you think is going to happen next?
Yeah, obviously, the uncertainty is not helping anyone in the field, let alone individuals. So we're trying our best to move a lot of things digitally, but it hasn't been easy, because that hasn't really been like, I personally, as a member so far, I can't think of any digital thing I've ever done before. But obviously, we've been actively still participating at the consultative meetings with the Council of Europe, and obviously study sessions were not an option, but thinking of ways to move that online again, and trying to keep up. But it's been affecting us a lot, and yeah, and obviously previously it would have been very difficult to set up an online meeting between members or even board members, but now I guess the only positive thing that I can focus on is that at least we can see more of each other, like more frequently, even though it's replaced with a screen. But yeah, I believe it has had a great impact, but we're gonna get out of this as well. So.
Definitely. I think moving everything online has been a big challenge for many organizations, for us as well. Definitely. I also had a question. So you were talking about like barriers that are kind of like the governmental level, and restrictions that do not or make you not able to do the work that you would like to do. And are there anything that, like on a citizen level, that could be changed to kind of make your work easier or better?
Yeah, absolutely. For young refugees, it's truly about, honestly, paperwork, like, because citizenship, residencies, let alone visas, obviously those are truly like, they're difficult enough for example, coming from myself, like I'm a Syrian in Armenia, which is obviously a non-EU country, so trying to even go to the EU for such events or for like opportunities to like with other organizations, it's already like a story of its own. So it would have been much easier if these processes were much easier, much less bureaucratic, because when you go to these institutions, especially like embassies and everything, they don't realize the layers that are there for you. Like they would just treat you as any other Armenian citizen when you're not really there yet. So having to actually reach that point is a big obstacle. And this honestly puts back a lot of young refugees who, and this takes years. It's not really a few months or anything. And obviously with COVID, there's this bigger delay and bigger pause on everything. So just bureaucracy is a nightmare for us. And yeah.
Yes. I think also especially young people are usually also a group that is overlooked a lot of things, and especially refugee youth will be hard affected.
Absolutely.
Are there any more questions?
We can have a discussion at this point.
Definitely. So if there are no more questions, I would give the floor to you, Ewelina.
Thank you. In the beginning, I must apologize if you hear some strange sounds. It's just my little dog playing around. Sorry for that. Oh, she just woke up when my presentation wants to start. So I hope I will manage in these conditions. Okay. Okay, is everything visible? Cool. So I am Ewelina Stefańska, and now I am a treasurer in Klub Studencki Pomorania. And I will tell about my song in the beginning. It's the song called XX, and it's we can say that it is a feminist protest song. So it is very close to me, and even now more than before, because you may know that in Poland we still fight for our reproductive rights. So I must stop just for a second, and I will be back. Sorry for a moment. Yes, I'm back. Sorry. Okay, so that was about my song. In general, the Klub Studencki Pomorania Student Club in English, is focused on helping youth to understand their culture, to learn their language, and just to encourage them to speak, to know some information about history, culture, to feel the Kashubian identity, and so on. Our initiatives are a Stolem's Medal Award, which is for people or organization which promote culture, Kashubian culture or Pomeranian culture, competition of knowledge about Pomerania, and it's for the high school students. Also for them are prepared workshops called Remusowa Kara, and 4-day workshops when we are focused on the language, on the culture, on the history, and just having fun actually. Another thing is dubbing competition, Kashubian language dubbing competition. We have, for example, our version of Shrek for Madagascar and so on. Another activity is taking care of our village house, traditional village house. Some of you maybe had an opportunity to be there during the Diversity Festival in 2017. Of course, we are members of VYRE, and I think for 3 years we are ordinary member of this organization. We also promote Kashubian and Pomeranian culture during popular events like Open Festival in Gdynia in the areas of NGOs. And now the topic of the day. What are prejudices of Kashubian group, Kashubian language group? Firstly, that we are mainly villagers, poorly educated, and in general, poor people. Actually, it must be said that the census, the research census 10 years ago proved that many people who said that they are daily speaking Kashubian are poorly educated and live in villages, but it changes still, and it's just a stereotype. Also, some people previously, but now also say that Kashubian are Germans, not Poles, or they are separatists in the eye of Polish people and so on. And other thing, also from the Polish perspective, is that Kashubian as a speech is only a Polish dialect, which is not the truth. And it is said actually in Polish law that it's regional language. But there are some people who still want to be written that way. The structural discrimination and inner problems, because I think it's very important also in this topic. Structural discrimination. Firstly, cutting subsidies which support Kashubian education, the language and knowledge about the region. 3 years ago we had a situation that Polish government just in the end of the year said that next year there will be less money, and there were no asking, no consulting, just cutting amount of subsidies, so less money for the education. Another thing is that if we have this money for education, because we have some money, civil servants, local governments don't give all of the money, all subsidy for Kashubian education. Sometimes this money goes, for example, for roads, constructions, and so on. Another thing with civil servants is that there was also, I think 3 years ago, a civil servant publicly suggested that Kashubians are separatists, as I said before. And another thing is the history, but it has an impact on the present. During the communism period in Poland, Kashubians couldn't speak their language in public. So they were discriminated. And after Second World War, also there were sometimes situations that Kashubians were seen as Germans. Inner problems, I think, must be mentioned because in our group of Kashubians, there are also problems with each other. We have problems with each other. Firstly, some fractions have different attitudes towards the Kashubian identity. Some says it's only a part language. Some says it's ethnic identity with language, a part language. But they feel like Polish people and Kashubian that's at the same time. And other people just feel as a nation, as a part nation, and it's okay that there are different views. It's not the problem. The problem is the lack of dialogue, constructive dialogue, constructive conversation with each other. And another thing is the sexism. You may think, and you are right, that women are less visible in the decision making, and there is an issue that even in the young age some women are interested in the topic. Then after years they are not among the people who are decided, who are in charge of deciding or decision making and so on. So it's also a problem of sexism, and it's also connected with adultism. That young people, it's very funny somehow because older generations want to have a support of youth, but at the same time they think that we are too stupid, too inexperienced, and so on. So somehow it's funny, but actually it's very sad because we are somehow discriminated in our group. And another thing, last thing, is that people don't speak Kashubian often in the daily life. It's connected with the history when people were somehow banned to publicly speak in Kashubian, and when our parents, my father, for example, was a kid, it was like that, and after years, for example, he didn't speak to me in Kashubian, only in Polish. And what are the tools and mechanisms against this process? For example, protests and campaigns. We want to share awareness about us, just to say in our words who we are. Another thing is that public figures and politicians from minority help to maintain this low status of the language, to lobby for subsidies and so on. And another thing is civil control of authorities. For example, in the case of subsidies money, if they are spent correctly or just lost somehow in offices. And about us, I want to say that here we have one film and 2 books. Actually, film is in Polish, Kashubian, and German partly, I think. Not German, not. In Polish, Kashubian, and two scenes in Russian. But Kamerdyner is the film about a complicated situation in the first half of 20th century in Pomeranian area. There are Kashubians, Germans, Poles, and after the Second World War, in the end of Second World War, also Russians. It's very touching, and it says something about our identity and history. Another thing is a guidebook, the Unknown Kashubia. It's also interesting, and in another thing in English is publication The Kashubs, Pomerania and Gdańsk, and it's also translated into English. So I recommend that two books and one film. Thank you for attention, and I'm ready for questions.
Thank you very much, Ewelina. So the floor is open for questions, if someone has any.
Yes, thank you, Ewelina. It was very interesting. I thought I know something about Kashubians, but there is still something that I could learn from you. It was very interesting. My question is, do the Kashubians have representatives on the politician level? Maybe on the local or maybe on the central level, who could help you to solve your own local problems? And also, just a small comment I found is also really interesting, because I'm from Russia and I study Slavic studies, and it's also interesting to see that so the same populistic rhetoric, so how they're talking about Ukrainian also like a Russian dialect.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know there was also something in Europe like this. Thank you.
Yeah, first question. We have local representatives in local authorities. It's common, but they're sometimes connected with the political parties bigger in the whole country. Sometimes they are self-made men somehow, but at the national level, country level, we also have representatives. Fun fact is that maybe you've heard something about Donald Tusk, which is the president. Yeah. So he's actually Kashubian. And another fun fact is that he learned somehow, he has learned that he is actually Kashubian, that he has roots from our co-founder, Lech Bątkowski, because he's somehow Bątkowski was Tusk's role model somehow. And we have also representatives in some commissions in the parliament, Polish parliament, and so on. And it works because in the comparison with another groups, somehow similar, somehow maybe a bit different, but similar, we have better situation in my view. That we have better situation. We have language which is recognized by the law. We have subsidies, which is connected with that status of the regional language. More money, to be honest, and it very helps in this decision making and so on. And another thing is that with the language, Polish language and Kashubian language, is that of course it's somehow colonialism point of view. That that you are part of our country, so you must be like us, whole Poland. And being different is not considered in general as some good thing. So And of course, Polish language has many dialects, but it is not our, dreaming that it is recognized by the law as a language, but it has linguistic marks to be considered as a regional language. So it is.
Thank you. You can see we have a question in the chat. So how is the approach towards refugees in Kashubian community?
I don't know any researches in that issue, but I can speak how I think it is. It only depends, I think, on the people, on the individuals. But in general, I think and I see that most of Kashubians are traditionalists, left-wing, and my thoughts are that many of them are not so open-minded. But I don't have any research about that, so it's only that's my thoughts. But another thing is also that young people who travel, who are highly educated, are more open and more open also for another cultures, for another situations which are difficult, and are more warm to welcome refugees.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Okay, then I will ask a question. Not having followed it very closely, but the political situation in Poland is, as far as I can see it, it's changing a lot, and there's a lot of more not so progressive policies coming up in Poland. Do you feel this as a community? Does it affect you, or does it affect your work?
Yes, we feel it because, as I mentioned, I think it was 3 years ago, there was this cutting a bit of the subsidies. It's one thing. This civil servant who suggested that we are separatists is also from the governing party. So that's the current mood. But for us, it's not such a bad situation, as I said, that we have some politicians from our group, and also in the governing party. We are somehow different with each other inside, but it's also sometimes helpful that this person also has some connections with them. But to be honest, it was better before that governing party was ruling.
Thank you. Any more questions? If not, I have a last one. So for my minority, and especially also the opposite one, so the German minority in Denmark, there has also been a lot of hate and discrimination, especially after the Second World War. And I feel like the relations have changed a bit also with the friendship between Denmark and Germany kind of growing again, becoming stronger. You said that you experienced this as well, like if you speak Kashubian outside of your homes and that people were not comfortable with this earlier. Do you see it kind of changing, or is it still not that people don't want to speak Kashubian when they're outside their homes?
In general, it's a barrier nowadays it's a barrier to speak publicly, or even to speak with, for example, your parent, because in my case, my father knows Kashubian from his childhood, but he didn't talk to me in Kashubian, or only in Polish. Now I've learned how to speak Kashubian at school, but we don't talk with each other in Kashubian. And the same thing is in the public space. It's more comfortable to speak when you're among people who know the language, or are connected with whole promotion of the culture and language. In our organization, in this bigger organization as Zrzeszenie Kaszubsko-Pomorskie, which is adult version of Pomorania, we can say. And it's easier, but still, at the same time, language. They should be proud that people are speaking, but still they are saying you've done this mistake, you are ashamed of Kashubians and so on. And there was like that also towards Pomorania. But another thing is also that when a few years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, in a smaller than Gdańsk, in the town smaller than Gdańsk, but in Pomeranian area, a very Kashubian town, I was talking with my colleague in Kashubian on the street, and in the train, and people were watching us. Actually, they were somehow curious, but at the same time, we were strangers to them. They knew that it's not German or Russian or so on, but it is not a common situation to hear nowadays in the street, the language.
Wow. Okay, thank you, both of you, Maria and Ewelina, for your input. I think we can say that it is clear that issues and challenges that you have brought forward tonight in areas like prejudice and discrimination, education and language, they are great examples of the challenges that don't affect like one minority group, but are often faced or experienced by others as well outside our little minority bubble. It's nice to shine some light on this. Thank you very much. Yes, you've definitely given me some food for thought, and I hope for the other ones joining tonight, they feel the same. So before we officially close the webinar, we would like to take a group photo. So if you don't want to be in the photo, just turn off your camera. And for those who want to be in it, very nice, everyone is here. So maybe Eva, you can give us a 1, 2, 3, so we all look pretty.
Okay, everybody get ready. Okay, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, great. Thank you. It's a good one. Yes, I would like to again say thank you to Maria and Ewelina for joining And thank you also for the participants tonight. I hope you have a great evening, everyone. Bye.
It was very
That was
quick.
Like a split second.
Yes. Well, it must be the quickest I've ever seen in any event. Yes.
Yeah.
Do you need a break, or should we directly follow? Continue.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Let's
Okay.
do it. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So the first part, I